So, the unfortunate reality today persists of the fact that almost everything has a cost. There are some things that are free materialistically, like maybe a water that's paid by ads or sponsoring or going off Facebook Marketplace and seeing a bunch of free stuff. But whether you like it or not, it costs something. Like maybe it's your time or energy or your gas. And although it doesn't cost a lot, it's going to cost something. Now, bear with me for a sec. I want to ask you something. What do you think mental cost is? Mental cost is the price you pay for everything that you do. Well, mostly everything. I'll explain. Um, Mental cost refers to how much something has an effect on your mental health. Most things that you do have an effect on your mental health, is which is essentially all I'm trying to say. But there are tons of things that can be harmful to your mental health, so you need to be careful with what you consume. I firmly believe that with what you consume, you release, if that makes sense. Obviously, if you let it, but slowly without mind, those things begin to seep into your way of thinking. So let me put it like this. If you're already going through a hard time, whether it's frustration, despair, or any sort of other like emotional or mental thing for that matter, and you're actively influencing those thoughts that correspond with it, you are never going to see the end of it. It's like this with music, content, social media, you name it. Anything that you do can affect your mindset, so be very careful. Although, even if you're being careful, sometimes you don't really realize what something does to you, especially like if you're desperate or gullible. What I mean by that is, I remember back in 2020 when people was like the world was ending and stuff. Bro, I was terrified, and I listened to anything that people told me. I felt guilt when I scrolled past a Christian TikTok, and I spread more hate than love because I didn't really know what I was doing. But no excuses, I know. Unfortunately for me back then, social media had completely reshaped my image of Christ and my image of Christianity. I didn't even really know what it meant to serve Christ because I hardly knew what the word Christian meant. I was really eager and desperate for a solution. I mean, I remember watching this video with a pink background. It was like pink and glittery. It was talking about what were sins and what weren't, and I think that's when I knew how to conquer lust. However, the thing about conquering sin, especially via social media, is the fact that not everything that works for you is going to work for me. And I say this because the amount of times I went on TikTok and I was like, how to stop sinning to lust, especially as an early Christian, honestly, like, the day that I heard if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off, I was actually petrified. I had to go in depth myself, and that's when I realized that the Bible is extremely metaphorical. But conquering sin is really difficult, and I'm sure you know that. I mean, in order to conquer sin, we'd have to triumph above it, but we're sinful, and we were all born that way. So, how do we conquer what's inside of us? Yeah, that's not really how it works, but I said it that way to build suspension. Anyway, you can control what you can, and respectively let Christ control what you can't. So, your actions, yeah, you don't really need to scroll through the comments of a sexual reel. Even if you think you can handle it, you can't. The reason why I say you can't is because by relying on your own will to overcome something much stronger than you, you're setting yourself up for failure. If you feel like you're at jeopardy, pray. If you feel like you will be at jeopardy, pray. When you wake up, pray. When you eat, pray. If you didn't get the memo, I think it might be to pray all the time, to leave no room for sin. I'm not really sure though. But anyway, do you guys know that one image where it's like a guy in the sunset and he's like holding his hands up with broken chains in the air? Um, that's how it feels to walk in Christ, but wait a minute. That sounds crazy. So, to explain, when you accept Christ, that feeling of pressure, like when you're tempted, that feeling that makes you feel like you're obligated to fall to it, you're broken free from that. So, that's why I went on about conquering sin, because we're already free if we're in Christ. Our chains are broken, but we often decide to walk back into them. Now, for a quick random topic change, throughout the Bible, there's a multitude of stories that have meaning in them. Whether it's Peter's denying of Christ, Saul's downfall, or the betrayal of Judas, they all have one thing in common. These are absolute prime examples of the cost of discipleship. Thing is, though, the discipleship of Christ isn't just about being Christ's disciple, it's about how he can affect your life. So let's take Judas, for example. Judas essentially ratted out Christ, but once he realized his mistake, he succumbed to the guilt and took his own life. It's not exactly the same for us, and I would actually hope not, but it's metaphorical. And here's how. Every day that we sin, we essentially betray Christ because we're choosing sin over Christ yet again. But instead of succumbing to the guilt, like how Judas did, we go back to him, right? Now, if you were to succumb to the guilt, then I'm not saying your spirit would die because I don't think that's even possible. But I'm saying that like what you have would starve essentially because your flesh can starve. So your spirit would be starving. But anyway, to give one more example, Saul. What I remember is he disobeyed God and then turned back to him demonstratively, and then he ended up committing suicide. That should speak for itself. But to wrap this up, the cost of discipleship is very simple. It's going to cost a fortune, more money than you can ever have. It's also going to be grueling, nothing short of devastation, and as if one half of yourself is being squished alive, only sometimes being fed, as the other flourishes slowly but surely as it blossoms. It's not exactly a great sales pitch, but it's the truth. Hope this could help somehow in some way. Bye bye.